Alrighty, so I think this is a good point to start here. So I want to say a quick thank you to everyone for joining us. We have, gosh, a couple dozen countries represented here today, and folks keep coming in, so I have to keep manually letting them in. So if you bear with me, I'm letting more people join. Now we'd like to hand it over to our esteemed EK instructor team. We've got Tatiana here, we've got Sarah May, Fernando, and Elliot. And I'm going to pause and hand it over to you. And thanks for hosting today, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Let me start sharing the screen. Yeah, excellent. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us today in this exciting session about KM and Enterprise AI. We're going to be talking a lot about the intersection between these two key concepts. And we're going to be discussing as well how knowledge managers can succeed using artificial intelligence methods. My name again is Tatiana Chakiji, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. As we all know, the landscape of knowledge management is evolving rapidly, and artificial intelligence is really becoming super important in this transformation. So we want to make sure that with today's webinar, you understand what this upcoming class of KM and Enterprise AI is going to include, what you're going to be learning out of it. And each of our facilitators today are going to share with you a little bit of what's coming up in the class. So you can really get a better idea of what you can learn for yourself, for your own organizations, as well as ask us some questions if you have about the content of the class. We are inviting everyone to attend this class, and in particular, we're focusing on knowledge managers, data managers. We want also knowledge and content engineers, taxonomists, and people working potentially in the public sector or like highly regulated industries that really need to ensure that people access information rapidly and under compliance. IT project managers as well that want to have a better idea of how KM and Enterprise AI intersect and how they can better manage their projects around those concepts. And then really anyone who is practicing knowledge management and would like to learn more about Enterprise AI. So welcome everyone to this exciting session. We appreciate you taking the time to be here with us, and let's get started. We're going to introduce the team of facilitators. I'm going to be one of the facilitators as well for this class. So again, my name is Tatiana Chakiji. I am a senior knowledge management consultant with Enterprise Knowledge, as well as a senior taxonomist. I've been with the organization for 8 years, but I've been working on KM and taxonomy for a couple of decades, probably, or so. It is my passion, and I really help helping organizations understand how they can better organize their content, how KM plays a key role in finding information, discovering information, and so on. So we'll be sharing with you some of those key concepts, methods, best practices, and so on during the class. With that, I'm gonna let my colleague Fernando introduce himself. Fernando?
Thank you, Tatiana. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Fernando Aguilar. I have been in the data analytics, data science space for about 10 years now. Last 5 of them, well, a little bit over 4 at EK, specializing in machine learning and building machine learning pipelines, doing some data engineering for our customers currently. With that, I'll pass the microphone to Elliot.
Thank you very much, Fernando. My name is Elliot Risch. I'm a technical consultant with Enterprise Knowledge, and I specialize in semantic AI solutions. Those are solutions that utilize generative AI and then semantic layer assets. I have a background designing and implementing enterprise semantic layer solutions, as well as a little bit of laboratory automation. I'm a recovering academic and was a professor of philosophy. I'll pass it on to Sarah May.
Thanks, Elliot. Hey, everyone. I'm Sarah May. I'm a senior semantic engineering consultant. I specialize primarily in ontology, both from the modeling aspect and also helping our clients think through strategy and how to go about, developing, implementing, and maintaining semantic models for all kinds of solutions. I also work quite a bit in KM strategy, So thinking through how do we use these kinds of solutions to bolster KM purposes at organizations. So very excited to be here today and speaking with all of you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. So as you can see, we have a team of experts in many different areas that will be sharing with you all what they have learned throughout the years based on like hands-on, projects they've been working on with multiple clients on various different industries and so on. So we'll be happy to share our knowledge and expertise with you during this class. I want to mention as well that we encourage you all to share any questions that you may have in the chat. We're going to be addressing those questions towards the end of this session. So let's get started. Our agenda for today is going to include having a quick overview of the class, and then we're going to get into each of the 4 modules that we have planned for you all. We'll give you an overview of what each of those modules include, and then, as I said at the end, we'll just get into a Q&A session in case anyone has specific questions for us about the class. So let's get started with the overview. This class is going to be delivered over a couple of days. That is about like 12 hours of instruction and, potentially a little bit more time if you want to dive a little bit more into specific concepts or some of the, fundamental kind of like ideas that you've been learning during the class. But there isn't any like homework or anything like that. It would be just more like time on your own if you want in addition to that. We're probably going to have some kind of discussion board or maybe a blog to help you all talk to each other and then talk about your experiences in relation to KM and enterprise AI as you're learning the different concepts throughout the class. During day 1, we're going to be focusing a lot on kind of like an introduction to KM and enterprise AI and a few other concepts around that. We'll talk about it in a minute, as well as understanding what are some of the top AI use cases and applications that we've seen with our clients, that we're seeing in the industry, and potentially kind of like getting into more details about what they mean and what they could mean within the context of your own organization. So we really want to equip you with that kind of information. And day 2 is going to get a little bit more into like hands-on with conceptual model design and also understanding what enterprise AI solutions approach would look like. What are the different approaches that we recommend depending on different variables, and again, how potentially that could look like for your own organizations depending on the complexity of the content, depending on the use cases, depending on some technical differences and things like that, or requirements and so on. And then during day 2, we'll also get into understanding if you wanted to move forward with an enterprise AI implementation for a particular use case that you have in mind, what does that implementation roadmap look like? If you need to develop a plan, what are some of the key elements that you need to keep in mind for that? And how does that roadmap could look like? So we'll get into more details with each of our facilitators in a few minutes. We want to present you with the class learning objectives just to better understand what you'll get out of this at the end of the class. So first of all, as I said, really understanding fundamental concepts and understanding how you can transfer that knowledge internally for your own organizations. We want you to develop a high-level understanding of KM and enterprise AI, how those 2 concepts intersect together. And also understand what are some of those common use cases and applications, and what is really the business value that it brings to an organization. So we'll explore that into a lot of detail. We want you also to be able to identify what is the level of readiness of an organization. It could be the organization that you work for, to move forward with an enterprise AI solution. And we'll explore different kind of like perspectives on what that readiness means before you move forward with AI. And as well, we want you to understand if you're planning for that kind of project, then what do you need to keep in mind and take into account. And lastly, throughout the class, you're going to be learning about industry best practices and tools and methods and approaches to really implement enterprise AI. So in the first module, which is Introduction to KM and Enterprise AI, we're going to start by defining what KM means. And some of you who may have taken already some classes through KMI, you may be more familiar with this, but in any case, we want to make sure that we start with the fundamentals. So we'll talk about why we see KM from like 5 different perspectives, or including 5 different pillars: people, process, content, culture, and the enabling technologies, to really capture and manage and share knowledge and information. So we want to make sure that we all have like clarity about what that means conceptually. We'll also get to define what enterprise AI, which again, from our perspective, it's really leveraging the machine capabilities to find knowledge, to discover knowledge, and not only knowledge, but also data and information, and see how that can align in a natural way with how we would look for information or process information or intuitively. So that's what both KM and enterprise AI look like from our perspective. We're also going to get into a lot of other definitions around these two concepts, including what is content management, what is data management, what is a semantic layer, what is a knowledge graph, what is machine learning, or natural language processing, and what are the large language models and how they're used. So we'll get into a lot of different foundational concepts that will be necessary to better understand how KM and enterprise AI intersect together. We're also gonna be talking about why knowledge managers should use AI, and in this particular slide, we're leveraging some key statistics that can help us emphasize the importance of enterprise AI. So over 85% of the content and information that we work with is unstructured. That is huge. That makes it very difficult to find. It makes it very difficult to organize. So again, we'll be looking at why is it important that knowledge managers can understand how to leverage AI to organize content, to go through content and be able to make it more visible and available for end users. Also, it looks like artificial intelligence is set to contribute to 45% of total economic gains by 2030. So a lot of organizations are going to be relying on AI to derive insights to make key and strategic decisions for their own organizations. Very important to ensure that enterprise AI is going to help an organization from many different perspectives. And in the class, we're going to understand what those various perspectives are, what those different use cases are, and why this is all important and essential. And towards the end of the first module, we're also going to get into an overview of the common enterprise AI categories. So we're going to take a look at various different types of AI as we see them, as we see they're being, evolving basically in the industry. And we'll take a look at how some of these focus more on analyzing and modeling data to derive some insights, how other categories help with different kind of approaches and use cases and purposes. So these are some of the categories that we'll be taking a look at as we move forward with the content in the module. With that, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Elliot to continue with module 2.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. In module 2, we're going to focus on 3 things primarily: common KM challenges that have AI solutions, or that we propose have AI solutions, a number of categories and use cases that we've identified in the space, and then a few AI readiness considerations. So on the first point of KM challenges, or common KM challenges with AI solutions, we've identified at least 6. So, if any of these stand out to you as particularly relevant, you're not alone. So application overload. There's so many different information systems that are all doing very specific things, and they all hold information within them. How do we address the problem of being able to retrieve the information that we want at the time of need? So being able to utilize knowledge graphs in conjunction with AI systems allows us to provide the AI system with the set of most relevant information at the time of need that it can then deliver to us in ordinary language. Moving over to content explosion. In the last 10, 15 years, we've seen just a tremendous amount of content. Most of that content remains untagged. Processing that content now is kind of more relevant than ever to allow it to be able to be processed by these machines. Generative AI specifically is really, really good at working with unstructured information, but being able to figure out where that unstructured information is and retrieve it and pull it in to the context window and feed it into a generative model becomes very, very important. Tacit knowledge structure and capture. So a lot of information, especially unstructured information, doesn't have any structure. Being able to use the models to impose a little bit of structure on them. We're seeing a lot of graph RAG capabilities here to kind of extract information and then reimpose structure on that information that can then be utilized later in answering questions. Collaboration silos. One of the things we've been seeing a lot is with all of the specialization in the different fields, people kind of get siloed. We don't know who has what expertise. One of the things we've been seeing is being able to use knowledge graphs, use semantic layer assets to be able to figure out who has what information or who has what skills, and then feeding that map into a generative AI model that then can tell us like, oh, you know, I don't have the information, but maybe ask this other person. Resource crunch, we always have the pressure to do more, with less, and consistently even, right? So being able to utilize generative systems to save ourselves a little bit of time, or specifically reserve the time that we have to do the things that are uniquely human that we kind of have to be there for. Allow the models to give like everything a first pass. That's kind of what we've been seeing. Institutional knowledge drain. One of the accounts I'm working on right now, we're trying to figure out ways to leverage and identify and extract information for an aging and retiring workforce. So that has been another thing that we've been working on. Moving on to some of the categories we've identified for the use cases. So we've kind of identified two streams here, right? There's an inside track, and that consists of describing use cases, some diagnostic use cases, even predictive and prescriptive use cases. We're also seeing an action track. One of the things that has been happening last year is we're being allowed to give the models, specifically the generative models, access to certain tools and certain like API calls that they can make, so they can actually act on information. So they're able to identify something that's coming in and then act on the basis of that information. So that's something that's still developing, but these are kind of the categories that we're operating with right now. Moving on to enterprise AI readiness. So we're seeing these are the things that we're running into as we like first start working with the client. One thing is a lot of clients, we come in and they're really, really excited, which is really awesome, right? But there's not a specific thing that they want to do. I think that getting ready for any sort of AI implementation in your knowledge management systems, you really want to come at it intentionally, right? You want to figure out what are the things that I do want to offload? What's the busy work that I'm doing that I would love to offload to kind of an automated system? And what are the uniquely human and interesting things that I'm doing that I'd love to have the extra time to spend on? When we've kind of broken things down and identified it like that and kind of set out like that, we usually find a pretty good use case. Assumptions that, so the second part, the assumptions that it's a single technology, it isn't a single technology. It's not just generative AI. There's all these different systems. There's inductive systems and deductive systems. So a lot of the reasoning that we do with our graphs and our ontologies, those are also a form of AI, and they're really, really helpful, and they can be utilized in conjunction with generative AI models, as I was noting earlier. Third thing, and this is kind of going back to the first thing, which is that like automation requires subject matter experts. It's less of like a robot that's going to like take over everything and take your job, and more like a really fast car. But you have to be going somewhere, and you have to have a driver in the seat. The last part is that most enterprise information is not ready for AI. We can't just dump everything in the middle and expect AI is going to sort it out. Again, this comes back to intentionality, being able to intentionally mark your information in correct ways, feed it into the models very intentionally. Those are the sorts of practices that we're seeing that are giving us the best results. So start now, start pulling things together, and that's going to be a set of the things that we're going to be talking about in this class. I will now hand everything over to Fernando. Thank you, Fernando.
I'll actually step in here ahead of Fernando.
Sorry.
All good, Elliot. So yeah, we want to talk a little bit about, enterprise AI solutions and the approach to those, as well as a bit about knowledge mapping, which, as Elliot was discussing, readiness for AI solutions, this is one component that goes into that. So if we go to the next slide, again, Elliot set up, the kinds of solutions that are out there, why you might be seeking out one of those. So the question is, how do we get there? In the course upcoming, we'll talk about the phased approach that we take to implementing AI solutions. Overarching, we're looking at user-centered design and taking an agile approach. So, iteratively working through your use cases and so forth to expand into, an enterprise scale solution. So as Elliot was mentioning, we do center the work around use cases. That gives us a good definition of what is the challenge that we're actually trying to design around. So it gives us some good guardrails. We're understanding what the user needs are, and we have a good sense of what our solution will need to solve based on that. So the slide that you're seeing here shows that iterative approach that we take. We always begin with a pilot or first implementable version, the lowest level of producing something that is sensible and valuable and kind of demonstrates how does this work and how can we continue to build upon it. From there, we go through operationalization. This might be expanding to additional use cases. We're looking at integrating with actual systems. Typically, we have some priority systems that we're working with initially. And then as we go to enterprise application and scale, we're looking at our advanced use cases. We're growing the infrastructure to be able to, expand the reach of our solution. And then the next slide we have is a little bit more expanding upon that AI readiness aspect. So content, of course, is key for any AI solution. You need to ensure that your input data and content information is of good quality, so you can ensure that the results of your AI solution make sense and are useful to you. I think we've all heard, garbage in, garbage out. This is what we're talking about here. When we talk about AI-ready content, it's like what it looks like and how to ensure that it's in the right state to support an AI solution. So we'll get into more of the specifics around that in the upcoming class. One example, though, is content standardization. We heard a little bit about that already. This is what enables AI to read answers more effectively, and it involves adding structure and context to your content by applying knowledge models such as taxonomies or ontologies. So these are some of the favorite things that Tatiana and I like to do as taxonomists and ontologists. So what are these knowledge models? They're basically standardized models for describing the important things in your business. And I'll show an example of that in the next slide. But I do want to note that these are part of a semantic layer, which is part of many AI solutions. And this is a layer that sits between your organization's source data and content and the applications where you or the users are actually interacting with the content. So it could be an intranet, for example. The semantic layer's job is to contextualize and connect all your content so it can be easily understood and acted upon. So wanted to give that context as we move into, what is knowledge mapping? This is an example, if you go to the next slide, of one of these knowledge models that you would find in a semantic layer. And again, these are tailored to describe and relate the concepts that are important to your business. and are used to, add structure, organize the content that is going to be used in AI solutions. And then we're, sort of wrapping up your content and data with this so it's cleaner and better understood by both you and the AI solution. So one key takeaway here is that these knowledge models are understandable by both humans and machines. So it leads to enterprise standardization, connection of disparate data and content, these value statements that we have here for reusing, being able to explain your data and the AI outputs, as well as scale across to new use cases. Okay, so I jumped in front of Fernando with that. I'll pass it back over to him for Enterprise AI implementation plan and road mapping.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention something, Sarah May, now that you were talking about the knowledge mapping, it's important to mention that we're going to be conducting some hands-on activities, right, for people to better understand how knowledge mapping works and how to better identify certain, entities and how to really build a knowledge model. So that's one of the hands-on activities that we'll be working on.
Great.
Thanks, Jeremy. Now let's pass it on to Fernando.
Thank you, Tatiana. Well, by this point, we will take everything we've learned so far and try to figure out a strategy and what tools you would need to realize enterprise AI across your organization or across your teams. Next slide, please. So we'll go over the tools and strategies that will help you assess enterprise readiness, either within your team or throughout your organization. So first off, we will start by discussing getting you what you need to get a strategy that assesses your organizational AI goals and make sure that they're in alignment with business objectives, and with tools to ensure that you have leadership buy-in into these enterprise AI initiatives. The second point is measuring the state of data and content in your systems. So we'll go over tools that evaluate the quality, accessibility, and structure of your data for AI use, and also look into what is currently in place or what you need to establish a strong data governance and content management best practices. The third point right there, going into skill sets and technical capabilities. Well, it's one of the most relevant key points in here, because people are usually the strongest asset in your organization, and will help you identify gaps in AI expertise. We'll also go into how to prioritize training for relevant roles, and we will help you get a strategy ready to ensure there is sufficient infrastructure and tools to support the people working in these enterprise AI initiatives. And of course, we'll go over strategies in change readiness to make sure you are able to foster a culture supportive of AI adoption in your organizations, making sure that stakeholders engage early to drive acceptance and adoption of your AI initiatives as part of your KM strategies. Next slide, please. Well, as we said on the last slide, people are our biggest asset when it comes to developing and deploying enterprise AI solutions. So we'll go over certain key roles that would make any team be the dream team in your organization. You will have a business team, for example, that makes sure that all the goals are relevant to the business and validate any designs that are proposed. You have a business analyst that acts as the middleman between the business team and the technical team, translating all of those business goals into technical requirements. And right on your technical team, we'll go over some other roles besides the ones you see on screen, but usually we tend to see a lot of knowledge engineers that work with ontologists and taxonomists to make sure they're building the data models and that they're mapping the right entities to the right data sources, and the data specialists that are always analyzing the current state of the data to make sure it's fit for enterprise AI consumption. We'll go into why having these roles is important for your project, and some of those are specialization and expertise, efficient communication, of course, accountability, and most important of all, making sure that everybody is rowing in the same direction and at the same pace. Talking about rowing in the same direction, we'll go over to the next slide, please. So that takes us to the importance of having KPIs and success measures as part of your enterprise AI initiatives. Well, first off, they help us define success. We talked about translating business goals into technical specifications. So KPIs actually help translating that broad, abstract business goal into specific measurable outcomes that make sure your technical teams and business teams are aligned. And that drives focus and alignment between the teams, making sure that they are both rowing in the same direction. They can track the same goals, even if they're in different languages, business and technical. It also helps quantify the impact of your enterprise AI initiatives, providing visibility not only to the team that's driving it, but also to stakeholders and leadership. And it supports continuous improvement by realizing what KPIs are important for your initiative. You have ongoing optimization of the knowledge management projects. This results in clarity and communication. So now stakeholders, whether they're in the technical side or business side, or even leadership looking from the outside in, they have a clear way to communicate how the project is developing and how it is providing impact. It also makes informed decision making easier on team members, since they know what's priority in terms of development, and it provides a clear return on investment. This is really important for leadership buy-in, since with this return on investment, they have continued or even increased investment in enterprise AI and knowledge management initiatives. Next slide, please. Now, of course, we always want to build future-proof solutions. So what's next in enterprise AI? What we've been seeing at with our clients and in the industry as a whole, we're seeing an increase in human and AI collaboration. So we'll go into how you can integrate these solutions as part of your workflows to remain competitive, since other businesses are already doing so and increasing their productivity. So how do we, talking about more the people in your organization, how do we start redefining roles that may need to be shifted to make way for these enterprise AI solutions? How do we assign responsibilities and making sure that the human expertise in our organizations is still leveraged in meaningful ways? Another trend that we're seeing is AI-driven knowledge management. So how can we enable personalized knowledge experiences through AI? And how do you prepare your data and content to prevent the spread of misinformation, which has been a huge issue recently? And that takes us to our third trend that we're seeing, which is the use of ethical and responsible AI, right? There are new regulatory frameworks that are coming up. So how do we balance a rapid AI innovation with our firms while still remaining compliant with these upcoming regulatory bodies? And what safeguards do we need to implement to ensure that we're treating our data with the privacy that it deserves, but also making sure that all our data is accurate for downstream consumption? And with that, we open the floor with questions on the next slide.
Thank you so much, Fernando, and all of our facilitators. Appreciate that. We're seeing a few questions here in our chat, so we're going to start addressing those. And if anyone has any additional questions, please let us know. So it looks like Rick had an initial question. It looks like Rick wasn't able to stay for the remaining of the call, but we'll still address the question. He was asking why we wrote information as opposed to knowledge in the definition of knowledge management. I think, yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, we really are talking about information, content, knowledge, data. I mean, a little bit of everything at this point, ensuring that we're able to capture and manage and deliver and present to end users any of these different pieces of content, data, information, or knowledge. So yeah, we'll make an update just to make it more specific, but yeah, that's a valid point. The next question that we have is from Mario Montoya. It's a question for Fernando, and it's about whether you would consider what you were explaining specifically for for an enterprise as a whole, or potentially in a large organization for a small unit. And I'll probably start by saying that these artificial intelligence, like readiness assessments that we recommend, could be applicable for an enterprise as a whole, but also they could apply to a smaller group within the organization, if that makes more sense. We've also seen that there are a lot of different factors that play a role, not only from a particular group. So even if you're analyzing a group, there may be some potential factors that you need to keep in mind from the organization for that. But Fernando, I'll let you expand on that as well.
Thank you, Tatiana. Yes, so definitely our assessments go from enterprise and at enterprise level, and we usually have strategies to identify key use cases that could result in the biggest ROI, so that you can have leadership buy-in. But yes, usually the way, depending on how mature the organization is, we've had clients that already have AI implementations across the enterprise, so they have the infrastructure in place to support an enterprise-wide minimal viable product, or even a proof of concept. But depending on the maturity of the organization, sometimes when they don't have this infrastructure, when they don't have these capabilities, then that's where the roles, I don't want to say mapping, but role identification and the right people, then we start with a team, right? With the team that's going to be driving these AI initiatives, and hopefully building up to be at enterprise scale.
Thank you, Fernando. We have another question that says, just moved. Is there a difference between concept mapping and knowledge mapping? Sarah, maybe you want to address that question.
Sure, yeah, that's a good question. And it kind of depends. Typically, when we start an engagement or are starting a new phase of a project, we might be conducting knowledge mapping or conceptual mapping, which is really just our opportunity to map out what are the things that exist in this domain, in this business, that will be important components of the solution. Ultimately, that translates into data concepts or data objects. But first we use, knowledge mapping to gain a sense of what's out there that we need to start tracking down for our AI solutioning.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sammy. Joshua had a question. Do you have, actually Brad had a question before that. Do you offer group classes for a large number of participants within the same organization? Yes, we've done that in many different fronts, whether it is specifically for taxonomy or ontology, or more on the enterprise AI or KM areas. So we can talk about that separately if you want. You can reach out to Eric, and then we'll get in touch on that. So thank you, Brad, for your question. Joshua asked, do you have any suggestions for trying to develop KM culture in an organization that doesn't have a formal CKO or KM cell? We interact with a lot of organizations, a lot of our clients who don't necessarily have yet a formal KM structure within their organizations. And in order to better kind of like try to develop that KM culture, it's very important to understand what are the business needs around KM. What is the value for the organization, the business value for the organization in exploring KM? And that may take different forms, such as identifying some of these initial business, like use cases to better understand. Is it because people are trying to access information faster from a particular area? Is it because there is a need to increase collaboration? Is it a need to potentially drive more business from the clients so that they can better understand, our solutions and products, and then that way, increase revenue? Like, what are the business drivers and how do they align with the corporate strategic objectives? So that's one of the key things that eventually will help from the top of the organization, from a leadership perspective, to help understand the importance of KM. And again, linking that to the use cases, I would say that that's when you involve more of the people who are on the day-to-day on finding information, creating content, tagging content, having the need to connect different pieces of information to make it more findable and so on. So again, involving each of those different people and make it more like user-centric would definitely help in identifying those models. And then there are quite a few different like best practices and approaches to foster collaboration and knowledge sharing and so on. Some of them take the form of like processes and more like day-to-day kind of practices. Some of them take the form of more technology-supported activities that would help reach out to a larger kind of audience and so on. But those are the things that come to mind initially. I don't know if Sarah May, you have any other thoughts on
that? I think what you mentioned, Tatiana, is pretty comprehensive. The only thing I might add is often we're working with other types of business units or functions. So we might be, doing a project within like the tech sphere of an enterprise or specific to the data sphere. And, we can apply those knowledge management best practices and kind of be the change agents that might be missing if there's not a formalized KM kind of structure within the organization. Mm-hmm. So you can bring KM, insert it into different parts of the organization too.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah May. And then there's a question from Elizabeth. Would be great in the class to learn how to appropriately select approaches based on the size of the organization. Things, for small or medium businesses. And yeah, I think, we'll address some of that as we get more into the various like use cases and some of the categories of enterprise AI and so on. We've worked with organizations from, various different types of sizes and industries as well. So we can add that kind of component or a flavor, when we start talking about those detailed categories and use cases. So we'll be happy to do so. And okay, we have a couple more questions here. From Mario, sounds like the scope of an enterprise is an organization, company, or subset thereof. Have you considered or experienced the exact definition of an enterprise that may be required to successfully achieve bigger picture goals, like supply chain, go market? Yeah, I don't know. Sarah, maybe you want to address that question?
Yeah, I think, Mario, I want to make sure I'm clear. Are you talking more about sort of domains or applications of a potential solution when you say supply chain, go to market?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah May. So for example, in some industries, there are knowledge management and concepts that are going to be necessary across an organization, not just a company. For example, if you happen to be in the energy space, emissions, are you still sticking to scope 1, 2, 3, or are you going to the cross-border concept? If you're in Europe, are you looking at red demarcations? And then thanks to COVID, all of us who experience the supply chain struggles, if people are using AI or generative AI or knowledge management, et cetera, How do we now make it so that whether you're sensitive to supply chains or you're sensitive to investor streams, whatever those dependencies are, for the bigger picture context of an enterprise, not a company, have you guys looked at that?
So I would say we work in sort of industry wide domains as you're talking about. So we've done a lot of work within the financial services space in particular. So I think that's one example of how a solution might be applicable across, an industry, like industry types of problems or that kind of scale of things. I'm not sure if Elliot or Fernando, do you have any additional context to add here? I guess to round that out a little bit, going back to how we go about our design of solutions, it is very use case based, as we mentioned. So we're not necessarily looking at every system that could impact an enterprise level. We're looking at what is the particular challenge that we're trying to solve and designing around that. And if that challenge is touched by supply chain or go-to-market pressures, things like that, then we would be accounting for that within our design.
Yeah, I think, just to add to Sarah May's response, I think that goes back to having KPIs and success measures in place. Without having a specific problem, a specific use case in mind, it would be impossible to measure the impact. And just for an example, I'm not sure I'm understanding the question, but like Sarah May said, right now we're both in a financial services project with a large multinational. And for example, we are starting looking at their non-financial risk ecosystem, and we are implementing different enterprise AI initiatives, going from auto taggers to recommenders to knowledge extraction initiatives. And they do touch with regulations that go across borders. Like, is this piece of data regulated in Europe, regulated in North America? So the solutions do expand across borders, across domains, because it also serves their wealth management arm. It serves their trading accounts as well as others. Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm completely understanding what's at issue in the question. Would you mind rephrasing it?
Yeah, Elliot. So an enterprise, like I said, could be a company or it could be extended value chains, right? So depending on where you're operating in, I like that you all use the financial or the fintech example. There's a lot of different things from a knowledge management standpoint or a conceptual standpoint, like NFTs and the bubble that happened because people got super excited about it. Cryptocurrency, the climate-related financial disclosures spearheaded by Michael Bloomberg. There's a lot of different things that extend beyond an individual enterprise, whether it's regulation or behaviors in specific pockets, Europe versus North America versus Asia Pacific, et cetera. So I was just curious, do your definition of enterprise extend beyond that within the knowledge that's actually owned and created within the enterprise itself, hashtag company or organization, or the extended macro view?
Perfect. All right. I think I understand the question now. I think that one of the things that we're seeing in the space of like using semantic layer applications is bringing in ontologies that are kind of just industry standard ontologies. So that's one of the things for like the financial sector, right? And we're seeing these ontologies be built up in lots of different sectors. Some work has been done, though not by us specifically, on attempting to capture facts inside, so creating knowledge graphs, not just ontologies for certain sectors. Obviously, when you're using any generative model, you'll have some set of information, maybe knowledge, but that will be kind of preloaded into it. I think actually given your question, one of the problems that we'll face going forward into the future is figuring out how to deal with the fact that these models have all this information, this external information that might be out of date, and making sure that we're able to correct for that. So, like this is a very complicated question, great question, and something that we have to think about a lot. But I think the context within which, at least I'm thinking about it, is figuring out how to edit information out of these models that is about the wider ecosystem when I'm trying to answer a question within a domain or an enterprise. But it's a very good question, something we have to think about a lot going forward.
Does that answer your question, Mary?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Very good. Excellent. I think we have a few minutes just to address a couple more questions that we have in the queue. There was a comment from Joshua about, like, you know, it often feels like those of us who are KM-minded need to do it more from the bottom up. And yeah, and look for this business case support metrics. I think that alludes to some of the comments that Sarah May and Fernando were also mentioning, the importance of having very clear business, cases and use cases, so that you can actually track that, you can actually measure it. Yeah, that's definitely important here in KM and enterprise AI. So I don't think there was a question per se there, but it was more of a comment. There is a question: is the training also relevant for people that don't have an immediate use case that are interested in enterprise AI in general? Absolutely. This class I mentioned earlier at the very beginning of this webinar, it's really for anyone who is interested in learning more about how KM and enterprise AI intersect, what they mean in the context of your own organizations. And then even if you don't have a use case yet, it's going to start opening up some opportunities for you, starting to think about different ways of seeing improvements in your organization. Oh, I just realized that this, top, enterprise AI category could potentially apply to this particular business area within my company, right? And then start exploring that route. So absolutely, we're happy to have you in the class, even if you don't have a particular use case identified. Regarding training in general, is there a contact? And I believe that Eric already provided a response, as well as Elizabeth. So there is already a URL, as well as the name of the person who will be addressing your questions. Is the recording available? Eric?
Yes. We're going to have the recording available probably the next couple of days. I want to say early next week. We'd just like to do a quick edit. So we'll make sure that everyone who registered with us today will have access to that. You'll be the first to get it before we post it in our social channels. So short answer is yes.
Excellent. Well, with that, actually, I forgot to share the last page of our presentation, but we welcome you to, register for this class. It's gonna take place in November. We have the specific dates here is November 5th and 6th. And the webpage with the details about the class is already available in the KM Institute. I'm actually going to put it here in the chat as well for those who don't have it yet. And we'll be happy to have you there. So thank you everyone for attending the webinar. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest in this particular topic. And again, our team will be very, very happy to share with you all our knowledge and expertise over the past few years in these two main topics. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, EK Instructor Team, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope to stay connected with each of you, and let us know if you have any questions about this exciting new course debuting in November. Thanks again for joining.
All right. Take care. Thanks again.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.